They say justice is blind, but the day my sister came to me, bruised and begging for help, I realized it wasn't blind at all. It just chose not to look. So I stopped defending monsters and became one they'd never see coming. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about what happens when justice finally opens its eyes.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Kim Matthews. I'm 33 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They say justice is blind. I used to believe that, until the night I saw what it refused to look at. Chicago's skyline glowed like embers beyond my office window. Inside, the world was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the lights, the slow ticking of the clock, and the whisper of my own exhaustion filled the space. I sat behind my desk, surrounded by files, each one proof that I was good at defending people who didn't deserve defense. Another day, another guilty man walking free. Another reason to wonder what my life had become. I stared at my reflection in the glass. 32, lawyer, successful, and utterly hollow. My mother used to say, "The law protects the good." I'd built my life around that promise. Now it sounded like a lie whispered to children to keep them believing in monsters with rules. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. I thought it was an associate who'd forgotten something. When the door opened, I froze. Kayla. My sister stood there, small, shaking, unrecognizable. Her face was a map of bruises, one eye swollen, lips split, fear stitched into every breath. She clutched her bag like a shield. "Don't call the police," she said quickly. "Please, Kim. Don't call them." Something sharp twisted inside me. I rose, but she flinched back, and that broke something deep. "Who did this to you?" I asked, though I already knew. She looked down. Silence answered, and in that silence the name burned through my chest. Marcus. The pen in my hand snapped in two. A clean, violent sound. Ink spilled across my palm, dark as blood. That crack, the breaking of a cheap pen, was the moment everything in me shifted. The air in the room changed, heavy and cold. "Kayla," I said, moving slower now. "Sit down." She hesitated, then crossed the room, her steps uneven. She sank into the leather chair opposite me, wincing as she moved. Her sweater sleeves were pulled over her wrists. I didn't have to see what she was hiding to know. "I'm fine," she whispered. "I just tripped." I'd heard that lie 100 times from clients' wives, but this was my sister, my blood. I sat in front of her, forcing calm into my voice. "You're not fine, and you don't have to pretend with me." Her eyes filled with tears. "He said if I leave, he'll take Alina. He says no one will believe me." Every defense I'd ever built for a client came rushing back like ghosts. Loss of control, temporary rage, provocation. I'd used those words to twist truth into mercy. Now I wanted to burn every legal pad that had ever held them. I looked at her and felt something ancient stir. The part of me that used to protect her from bullies when we were kids. That girl hadn't died after all. She'd just been buried under years of courtroom decorum. I walked to the door, closed it, and locked it. The metallic click echoed in the silence like a verdict. Kayla watched me, confused. "Kim, what are you doing?" I turned back to her. "They say the law is blind," I said, my voice low, steady. "But tonight, we're going to show it can see. And right now, it's staring straight at Marcus." Her eyes widened. Fear. Hope. A dangerous mix. I sat beside her again, close enough to feel the tremor in her shoulders. "Listen to me," I said. "You're safe here. You and Alina. He's not touching you again." She began to cry quietly, hands trembling in her lap. I didn't reach out. I'd learned that comfort sometimes needed space, but I stayed close, my voice a thread in the dark. You trusted the wrong man. I trusted the wrong system. Now we fix both. Outside, the city was starting to freeze under November wind. The L rumbled in the distance. Inside, my office had turned into a confessional. For years, I'd convinced myself that morality was paperwork, that justice lived in case law and closing arguments. But sitting there, watching my sister's tears stain the floor, I finally understood. Justice isn't blind. It's selective. It looks away from the people who need it most. Kayla's breathing slowed. Exhaustion took her. I let her sleep on the couch while I stood by the window, staring at the dark reflection of myself, the woman who'd built her reputation defending monsters. In the glass, my reflection smiled back faintly, and I hated it. I thought of Marcus, his charm, his smirk, the way he shook my hand at their wedding, the way I'd ignored my instincts because I didn't want to seem jealous or cynical. No more ignoring, no more pretending. I washed the ink from my hands. It swirled down the drain like black blood, disappearing fast. If only real stains came off that easily. When I looked up again, my face in the mirror didn't look like mine anymore. The fatigue was still there, but beneath it was something sharper, colder. For the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt alive, dangerous. Sleep, Kayla, I whispered into the stillness. Tomorrow, we stop playing by their rules. I turned off the lights. The city flickered beneath me, alive and indifferent. Somewhere, Marcus Johnson was pouring himself another drink, confident that the world still belonged to men like him. He had no idea his trial had already begun. That night, the city outside my window never slept. Chicago hummed. Car horns, wind through alleys, the low, pulsing rhythm of a place that thrived on noise. Inside my apartment, though, everything was still. Too still. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. Kayla sat on the couch, her face half hidden beneath the glow of the lamp. She hadn't said much since we left the office. She just held the edge of her sweater like it might come apart if she let go. I'd made tea she wouldn't drink. The bruise on her jaw had deepened to a purple-black shadow, the kind that doesn't need explanation. "Does it hurt?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, the smallest movement in the world. Not as much as before. She was lying, of course. The pain wasn't physical anymore. It was the kind that lived under the skin, the kind that taught you to flinch before anything even touched you. I sat across from her, elbows on my knees, watching steam curl from my untouched cup. My laptop glowed behind me on the desk, the resignation letter already half-written. The cursor blinked like an accusation. For 10 years, the law had been my armor, my structure, my excuse. Every time I doubted what I did in court, I reminded myself I was defending due process. I'd built an entire moral identity on the idea that my work mattered, but tonight, none of that mattered. Not when my sister, the girl who used to braid my hair and steal my clothes, was sitting 5 feet away, terrified of the man she married. "You could still go back to work tomorrow," Kayla said suddenly, her voice small but steady. "You don't have to do anything drastic because of me." Her words landed like a test, a plea for me to stay safe where she couldn't. I looked at her, at the fragile way she tried to protect me when she was the one who needed saving. "I can't," I said simply. "If I walk into that courtroom again and defend another man like Marcus, I won't recognize myself anymore." She said nothing, but I saw it in her eyes. The guilt. The way she blamed herself for my choices. For my anger. For everything. "Kayla," I continued, softer now, "this isn't your fault. He did this to you, and he's not done until someone stops him." She looked down at her hands. "You really think you can stop him?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." The truth was, I didn't know. But I needed her to believe I did. Because if she didn't, she'd go back to him. That's how it always happened. Abuse and forgiveness. Spinning in endless circles until someone either escaped or disappeared. The cursor on my laptop blinked again. I walked over, opened the letter, and read what I'd written. To the partners, I hereby resign my position effective immediately. I no longer have faith in the system we serve. I stared at the words. It didn't feel brave. It felt like grief. Like burying a part of myself that had once believed in something clean. I hit save. When I turned back, Kayla was watching me, eyes wide. You actually did it? I nodded. Yeah, I'm done. A long silence hung between us. Then she whispered, You always said quitting meant losing. I almost smiled. Maybe losing's the only way to start winning again. A soft sound came from the hallway. Small footsteps. I looked up, and there she was. Alina, 5 years old, her hair sticking up in wild curls, clutching a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She blinked sleepily at the two of us. Mommy? She murmured. Then her gaze shifted to me. Aunt Kim? Kayla stiffened. Sweetheart, you should be asleep. I heard voices, Alina said. She walked over, bare feet silent on the hardwood. The light caught her eyes, bright and unguarded in a way her mother's no longer were. She stopped beside me, looking between us. Are you mad? I crouched down so we were eye to eye. No, honey, I said. We're just talking. Alina nodded solemnly, like she understood more than she should. Then she reached into the pocket of her pajama pants and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I made you this. She handed it to me and stepped back. Shy now. I unfolded it carefully. It was a child's drawing, stick figures with messy hair and bright colors. 2 women holding hands. One smiling, one crying. Above them, in crooked letters, she'd written, Strong girls together. Something inside me cracked. I looked at Kayla and she looked away, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. I placed the drawing on the table like evidence. You see this? I said quietly. She already knows. She knows what strength looks like, even when the world doesn't. Kayla pressed a hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. I didn't move. Sometimes silence says what words can't. After a while, Alina climbed into her mother's lap, wrapping small arms around her neck. Kayla kissed her hair and whispered, I'm sorry. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the city light filtering through the blinds. I stood by the window again, watching my own reflection fade into the darkness. The lawyer in the glass was gone. What remained was a sister with a plan she hadn't yet admitted to herself. In my mind, I could already see Marcus's face, his arrogance, the confidence of a man who'd never been held accountable. I thought of the files I'd defended, the men I'd helped walk free because the law didn't care about bruises without witnesses. No more. Behind me, the sound of quiet breathing filled the room, Kayla and Alina asleep on the couch. The glow of the computer cast a pale halo around them, fragile and human. I whispered to myself, the system failed her, but it won't fail twice. The next morning, I'd start the first phase, a new identity, a dangerous plan. A sister's promise sharpened into purpose. I looked again at Alina's drawing. 2 women, one smiling, one crying, both still standing. Justice wasn't blind. It had eyes. Mine. And they were finally open. Evanston greeted me with cold wind and gray light, the kind of day that smells like metal and rain. I parked across from Marcus's house and sat for a long time, hands tight on the steering wheel, watching the porch light flicker. From the outside, it was the picture of suburban peace. White siding, trimmed hedges, a family home. But Kayla's voice echoed in my head. You don't understand, Kim. He makes the walls listen. I drew a breath that scraped my throat. You're Kayla now, I whispered to my reflection, Just survive the night. The door opened before I could knock. Marcus stood there, tall, composed, wearing a suit like armor. His tie was loosened, eyes glazed from the first drink of the evening. "You're late," he said, smiling in that sharp professional way that once charmed judges and ruined women. "Dinner's cold." His voice alone made my stomach tighten. I stepped inside anyway. The smell hit me immediately. Beer, sweat, and something stale that clung to the curtains. The living room was spotless but lifeless, the air too still. A clock on the wall ticked loud enough to sound like judgment. Diane Johnson, his mother, sat at the table with a perfect posture that could slice air. Tanya, his sister, scrolled through her phone, pretending disinterest. "You're late," Diane repeated, her tone flat. "We waited." "I'm sorry," I said softly. The words tasted like rust. "You should be," she replied. "The food's ruined. You can clean up after." It was a script, rehearsed long before me. I lowered my eyes and took the seat Kayla always used, the farthest from Marcus, but still within reach. He poured himself another drink, glanced at me. "You look different," he said. "New makeup?" "Just tired," I answered. He smirked. "Good. Maybe it'll keep you quiet." The laughter that followed, his, Diane's, Tanya's, wasn't loud. That made it worse. It was soft and satisfied, the laughter of people who knew no one would ever challenge them. Dinner dragged on. Marcus bragged about a client. Diane complained about the neighbor's dog. Tanya took pictures of her meal. No one looked at me, not even when I flinched at the sound of a chair scraping the floor. I realized then, this house ran on silence. Afterward, I stood at the sink washing dishes. The water was scalding, my hands raw, but the heat grounded me. The rhythm of cleaning steadied my breath. Behind me, their voices drifted from the living room, layered with contempt disguised as normalcy. "She's lucky Marcus puts up with her," Diane said. "She doesn't look so lucky," Tanya muttered. "She'll learn," Diane replied. "They all learn." I gripped a plate so hard it nearly shattered. Later, when the house finally fell quiet, I moved through the hallway, memorizing details. The crooked wedding photo, the half-empty glass of whiskey on the counter, the locked cabinet by the stairs. I was building a map, a record. Every corner whispered the same story. Domination disguised as order. Alina's room was the only place untouched by it. I stepped inside, breath catching at the soft colors and toys lined up neatly on the shelves. The night light cast stars across her sleeping face. I knelt beside her bed and whispered, "Hey, sweetheart. Mommy's safe, I promise." She stirred, eyes fluttering open for a second, then drifted back to sleep. Her tiny hand reached for mine before letting go. On her nightstand sat a small music box. I turned the key, and a quiet melody began. "You Are My Sunshine." The same song Kayla and I used to sing to each other as kids during thunderstorms. The sound felt like both a memory and a wound. When the song ended, I shut the lid and slipped out, careful not to wake her. Back in the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed, facing the mirror. My reflection didn't look like Kim Matthews anymore. No courtroom polish, no confidence. Just a woman wearing someone else's skin, eyes steady with something colder than fear. Resolve. This wasn't just infiltration. It was empathy turned into strategy. I had to live what Kayla lived to prove it, to trap him in the evidence of his own cruelty. The floor creaked outside. Heavy steps. Male. The door cracked open an inch. Marcus's voice slithered through. "You up?" My pulse thudded. "No," I said, steady. He chuckled. "Good. Keep it that way." The door closed again. The sound of his steps faded down the hall. I sat frozen until the silence returned. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the small recorder I'd hidden there. The red light blinked softly. Alive. I pressed it to my chest for a moment, feeling the hum of proof. One day, this tiny device would speak louder than all his lies. Before lying down, I stripped the rough sheets and replaced them with clean ones from the closet. It was a small act, meaningless maybe, but it felt like reclaiming air in a house that had none. Then, softly, I sang the same lullaby from Alina's room, my voice breaking halfway through. I didn't stop. Each note reminded me why I was here. Justice didn't wear robes. It walked in quietly, uninvited, with a voice calm enough to scare monsters. As I turned off the lamp, the house settled into uneasy sleep. Marcus believed he was safe in his kingdom of control. But tomorrow, I'd start dismantling it piece by piece, camera by camera, lie by lie. For now, I let the dark hold me. The fear, the anger, the plan. They all lived together under my ribs, breathing in sync. Because tonight wasn't about revenge yet. It was about understanding the shape of the cage, so that when I broke it, there'd be no pieces left to rebuild. Dinner the next night was quieter. That should have made it safer. It didn't. I sat at the table, hands resting loosely in my lap, while Marcus poured himself another drink. The ice cracked against the glass, a small, sharp sound that set every nerve in me on edge. He'd been simmering all evening, pacing, muttering about a coworker who didn't know his place. I'd seen this version of him before, through Kayla's stories, through the bruises she wore like confessions. But hearing it, feeling it from across the table, was something else. "Did you even listen to me?" he snapped suddenly. I blinked, slow and careful. "Of course I did." He smiled, that dangerous half-smile. "Then repeat what I said." My pulse quickened, but I met his eyes anyway. "You said people at work don't respect you because they're afraid of what you might become." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, surprisingly, he laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You've got a smart mouth again. You really should fix that." Diane looked up from her plate, tone clipped. "Marcus, eat. You're scaring her." But she didn't mean it. Her voice wasn't protective. It was performative. A line rehearsed to keep her own guilt clean. Marcus turned his glare to me. "She knows when to shut up." I didn't. Not this time. When his hand shot across the table, I caught his wrist midair. Hard. The movement was instinctive, my grip unflinching. He froze. His skin was warm, pulse pounding beneath my fingers. The room held its breath. "Marcus," I said evenly, "don't." His eyes widened, not with pain, but confusion. For the first time, someone had disrupted the script. Diane's fork clattered to the floor. Tanya's mouth fell open. He tried to pull away, but I didn't let go. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the space. When I finally released him, he stumbled back a step, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he muttered. "Nothing," I said, my voice calm, measured. "I just remembered who I am." The moment hung there, fragile, electric. I could almost hear the foundations of his control start to crack. He turned away abruptly, grabbing his drink. "You're losing it, Kayla. Maybe you should rest." "Maybe," I said. But we both knew I was the one in control now. He left the table. Diane followed him, whispering, glancing back at me like I was contagious. Tanya just stared, a hint of something, fear, admiration, in her eyes. When the room emptied, I exhaled slowly, my hands still trembling under the table. The act was small, but in houses like this, rebellion never needed volume. It just needed to exist. I stood, cleared the dishes, and moved to the sink. Alina's laughter echoed faintly from the hallway. Soft, tentative. She was coloring at the coffee table, the only piece of innocence in this suffocating house. I joined her, crouching down, beside the tiny tower of crayons. She looked up, unsure at first. Then she smiled. "Mommy said you'd sing to me tonight," she whispered. Her trust landed like a warm weight in my chest. I nodded. "I will. Promise." She picked up a blue crayon and started to draw. A tall figure holding hands with a smaller one, the same way she'd drawn us before. She didn't call me Aunt Kim. She didn't need to. Her little fingers brushed mine as she reached for another color. That touch was everything. The first bridge of trust. Later, after Diane and Tanya had gone upstairs, Marcus returned, half drunk, eyes glassy but sharp. He leaned against the doorframe, studying me. "You think you're better than me now?" he asked. I didn't look up from the sink. "I don't think about you at all." He crossed the room slowly like a predator circling prey. "You've changed. I don't like it." "That makes two of us." His hand gripped my shoulder hard enough to bruise. I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned my head, meeting his gaze full on. "You really want to hit me right now, don't you?" I said quietly. He blinked, thrown off by the calm in my voice. "Go ahead," I continued. "But if you do, remember, this time, someone's watching." He released me slowly, confusion flickering into fear. For once, the mask of control slipped. He didn't know it yet, but I had planted 2 small recording devices that morning. One under the table, one in the kitchen light fixture. They'd capture everything. His words, his threats, his silence. He stormed off without another word. When the house finally settled, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the only light coming from the fridge. My hand was still shaking from where he'd grabbed me, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was energy. Focus. Alina padded into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed, dragging her stuffed rabbit. She climbed into my lap without a word. "Bad dream?" I whispered. She nodded against my shoulder. "Mommy says dreams can't hurt me." "She's right," I said. "Dreams can't. But people can. And sometimes you have to teach them to stop." She looked up at me with that fearless curiosity only children have. "How do you teach them?" I smiled softly. "You show them you're not afraid anymore." She didn't understand, but she smiled back. Then, quietly, she reached out and touched my cheek. The same way she must have comforted Kayla after every storm. For a heartbeat, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt human. When she fell asleep in my arms, I carried her to bed. I lingered in the doorway, watching her breathe, small and safe beneath the covers. Then I turned off the light, leaving the recorder blinking faintly on the nightstand. A silent witness waiting for morning. In the mirror across the hall, I caught my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the lawyer who once believed justice came from judges. She was someone sharper, quieter. Someone who understood that truth needed teeth. Tonight had been a warning. Tomorrow would be a test. Marcus thought he'd regained control. He didn't see the shift yet. The way Diane looked at him differently now. The way Tanya avoided his eyes. Fear changes direction when power moves. And it had moved. I walked back to my room, the floor creaking beneath my feet. I could feel the house breathing with me, waiting. For the first time since I'd arrived, I wasn't the one afraid to sleep. Because now, he was. The dawn crept in slow and gray, light barely cutting through the blinds. The house was silent. The kind of silence that made your pulse sound too loud. I sat up, feeling the cold crawl up my legs from the tile floor. Today wasn't about surviving Marcus's house. It was about making it confess. I slipped out of bed and crouched by the desk where my bag waited. Inside were the tools that would turn his power against him. 5 miniature cameras, 2 audio recorders, 1 encrypted drive. My hands shook only once as I unzipped the bag. Not from fear, but from focus. Kayla's stories had given me the map: the hallway where he pinned her, the kitchen where he broke a plate near her face, the dining room where Diane insulted her until she cried. I knew the spots by heart. I'd studied them like a case file. The first camera went behind the mantel clock, its tiny red light aimed at the couch where he sat each night with whiskey and self-righteousness. The second beneath the dining table, staring up at the throne where Diane issued orders like commandments. The third in the hallway vent, where my sister's tears had once fallen silently to the floor. 2 more in the kitchen and by the front door. Each click of tape was an act of rebellion. When I finished, the walls had eyes. Diane appeared, wrapped in her robe, her expression sharpened by habit. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I answered, turning off the coffee pot. "Marcus says you've been different." "Maybe I'm just tired of saying thank you for pain." Her mouth thinned. "Be careful, dear. Men don't like that kind of talk." "Then it's a good thing I'm done caring what men like." She blinked, unsure if she'd been insulted, and left. I smiled to myself. Every word of that conversation had been recorded. An hour later, Marcus stormed in. His tie was loose, his breath sour. He slammed the fridge, muttering curses. "What's for breakfast?" "Eggs and toast," I said. He scraped the food into the trash. "Cold." "You were 30 minutes late," I replied. "You can't do anything right." I stayed silent. The camera above the counter watched him, patient and merciless. By noon, I had hours of footage: his insults, Diane's scolding, Tanya's silent compliance. Each word was a line of testimony, every sneer a piece of evidence. Then, just after lunch, the moment came. Marcus stepped into the hallway as I passed. His eyes were bloodshot. "You think you can ignore me now?" "I think I can choose what matters." His jaw clenched. "You think you're better than me?" I met his gaze. "No. Just smarter." The slap never came. Instead, his hand clamped around my arm, hard enough to bruise. I didn't pull away. I let him hold me, let the camera above the vent capture every second. "Let go," I said evenly. He didn't. "Go ahead," I whispered. "Keep talking. Every word helps me." For a moment, confusion flickered across his face. Bullies don't know what to do when their prey stops trembling. He shoved me away and stalked off, cursing under his breath. I pressed my fingers to the mark he left. The pain was sharp, but it steadied me. Proof had weight. Hours later, flashing blue and red lights cut across the living room. Marcus had called the police. "She attacked me," he told them, voice cracking with rehearsed fear. "She's unstable. My mother saw it." Diane hovered behind him, hand to her chest. Tanya avoided my eyes. One officer turned toward me. "Ma'am, is that true?" I smiled. "No, officer, but I can show you what is." I retrieved my laptop from the counter and opened the file labeled Hallway 12 found 43 p.m. The video filled the room. Marcus's voice, his hand grabbing my arm. My calm reply. The truth played out in high definition. When it ended, the officer looked at him, unimpressed. "Sir, this isn't what you described." Marcus's face drained of color. "She's setting me up." "No," I said, closing the laptop. "You're just finally seeing yourself." The officers left after a warning. The silence they left behind was louder than any fight. Marcus stood shaking, his anger too big for words. "You think this makes you safe?" I met his eyes. "No, it makes me ready." That night, the air in the house was tight, stretched thin like glass. Diane stayed upstairs, pretending to pray. Marcus drank alone in the living room, his reflection glaring back from the window. The power balance had shifted. He didn't know how much yet, but he felt it. In the guest room, I sat at the desk, arm throbbing, and began typing. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Marcus Johnson, Evanston, Illinois. All recordings attached." I encrypted it, then sent it to a trusted contact from my firm, someone who owed me more than one favor. My career could burn for this. My reputation could vanish. But the truth mattered more. Before bed, I checked on Alina. She was asleep, her little hand curled around her stuffed rabbit. The sight of her innocence in that poisoned house nearly broke me. I brushed a curl from her forehead. "You're safe now, sweetheart," I whispered. "I promise." Her eyelids fluttered. "Mommy?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I said softly. "Mommy's here." Because tonight I was. Back in my room, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The bruise on my arm had deepened to purple, blooming like evidence under my skin. I didn't hide it. I'd earned it. I turned off the lamp. The house went dark except for the faint red dots from the cameras. Steady, patient, watching. Marcus thought he still ruled this house. He didn't realize it was already turning against him. "Good night," I whispered to the darkness. "Tomorrow, you speak." After the police left, the house felt strange. Too still, like it was holding its breath. Marcus barely spoke. Diane glared without words, and Tanya avoided my eyes. I didn't need conversation to know what they were thinking. I'd humiliated him. And men like Marcus never forgive humiliation. They erase it. That night, I lay awake, watching the faint red lights of my hidden cameras blink in the dark. Proof. Witnesses. Eyes that never blinked. I didn't sleep. I waited. Morning came heavy and silent. Marcus sat in the kitchen, staring into his coffee. "You think you're clever," he said without looking up. "No," I replied evenly. "I just think I'm done being afraid." He slammed the mug down hard enough to spill it, but didn't answer. That silence told me everything. I was under his skin. By noon, Diane cracked. "This house used to be peaceful," she snapped. "Ever since you came back, it's like living with a curse." I smiled faintly, stirring my tea. "Curses only stick to the guilty, Mrs. Johnson." She froze. I let the words hang. The recorder under the counter caught every syllable. That afternoon, I reviewed the footage and copied everything to an encrypted drive sewn into my jacket. Hours of cruelty preserved in perfect detail. But something still felt unfinished. Marcus wasn't the type to surrender quietly. He'd lash out again. He always did. I didn't have to wait long. Around 9 p.m., I heard voices downstairs. Low, urgent. I slipped into the hallway, staying in the dark. The mic hidden in the vent caught every word. Diane's voice, sharp and trembling. "We can't let her ruin us. She's unstable. If she keeps pushing, Marcus could lose everything." Marcus's tone was darker, slurred from whiskey. "She won't ruin me. I'll take care of it." Then Tanya's small, scared voice. "You said that about Kayla before you—" Silence. A hiss from Diane. "Enough." Then Marcus again, cold and final. "Kayla was weak. I won't let this one humiliate me too." My breath caught. "Before you?" The implication hit like ice. Kayla had escaped, but maybe not because he'd let her. Diane's voice returned, clipped and pragmatic. "Then you do what must be done. A few pills in her coffee, a fainting spell. Something the police can't question. Once she's hospitalized, we'll say she's paranoid, unstable." Marcus grunted approval. "Perfect. Tomorrow morning." Every word was caught on tape. I didn't move until their voices faded, my hands gripping the wall to stop the shaking. When I slipped back into my room, I immediately downloaded the file, my heart thudding in rhythm with the red recording light. By dawn, I had their confession. When I entered the kitchen that morning, the air felt staged. Marcus sat waiting, a mug steaming on the table. Diane hovered near the sink, pretending to clean. Tanya watched from the doorway, pale and jittery. "Morning," Marcus said smoothly. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep," I replied. "Drink," he said, pushing the cup toward me. "You'll feel better." I lifted it slowly. The smell was wrong, bitter, metallic. I brought it to my lips, took a shallow sip, and let my body sway. Then I let go. The cup clattered to the floor as I crumpled, my head hitting the tile. Diane gasped, exactly as rehearsed. "Marcus, she's fainting." He crouched beside me, voice a whisper. "Should have stayed in your place." That was when I opened my eyes. His smirk died instantly. "You really think you can outsmart a lawyer, Marcus?" For a moment, no one moved. Diane's hand froze midair. Tanya's breath hitched. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. One tap, and the kitchen filled with their own voices. "A few pills in her coffee. Once she's hospitalized, we'll say she's paranoid." Marcus stared at the phone like it was a live grenade. "Where did you—" "I told you," I said, standing slowly. "Every room in this house sees you now." Diane lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. "You can't prove that was last night," she shouted. "Actually," I said, pulling the small drive from my pocket, "I can. Time-stamped, audio verified, plus your fingerprints on the mug." Marcus's face turned gray. "You'll regret this." "No," I said softly. "I'll remember it." For the first time, no one spoke. The house itself seemed to listen. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I wanted them to feel what my sister had felt. The fear of waiting, of knowing the world had already turned against them. Justice sometimes needs silence to sharpen its teeth. I turned and walked away, leaving the mug on the floor, the poison still steaming. As I passed the mantel clock, the tiny red camera blinked once. Marcus's reflection stared back at me, small, cornered, terrified. Upstairs, I locked my door and opened my laptop. My hands trembled as I uploaded the files to a secure folder, attaching a note. "If anything happens to me, release everything." I sent it to an old contact from the firm, someone who loved the truth more than their job. Then I closed my laptop and sat still, letting the adrenaline fade. For the first time since stepping into this house, I felt power settle into my bones. Not rage, not fear, control. They had tried to poison me, to erase me, but instead, I'd caught their confession in their own voices. Justice didn't need a courtroom anymore. It lived in every blinking light hidden in their walls. As I turned off the lamp, the house returned to silence. The red dots glowed faintly through the dark. Constant, patient, recording. "Good night, Marcus," I whispered. Tomorrow, the jury arrives. Morning came gray and heavy, pressing against the windows like fog that wouldn't lift. The house was too quiet, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the verdict. I'd barely slept, my body still humming with the residue of the night before. Marcus had paced the hallway past midnight, his footsteps sharp, then silent. Now, it was time. I walked into the kitchen just after sunrise. Diane sat at the table, rigid as marble. Tanya hovered behind her, eyes red. Marcus leaned against the counter, nursing a drink he didn't need. His face was drawn tight, but his arrogance still lingered like a bad cologne. "You're still here," he said coldly. "Guess my mother's little recipe wasn't strong enough." Diane flinched. "Marcus, please." I set my laptop on the table. "You're right," I said evenly. "It wasn't." He smirked, but his eyes flickered. "You think you're clever? Recording people in their own home?" "I don't think," I said, opening the laptop. "I know." I pressed play. Their own voices filled the kitchen. His, Diane's, Tanya's. "A few pills in her coffee. Once she's hospitalized, he can claim she's unstable." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Tanya started crying. Marcus froze, the blood draining from his face. He slammed his hand on the table. "You manipulated that." "Really?" I turned the screen toward him. "That's your voice. That's your kitchen. That's your mug. His jaw clenched. He looked around the room as if searching for a way out. You can't prove when it was recorded. I smiled faintly. Timestamps, Marcus. I built my case the same way I built others. Flawless. He laughed bitterly. So what now? You think this makes you safe? You broke the law, sweetheart. No, I said, leaning closer. You broke people. He glared at me. What do you want? Freedom. For Kayla and Alina, and your signature on these. I slid the envelope across the table, divorce papers, and a custody agreement. You'll sign, you'll walk away, and if you ever come near them again, this footage goes to every news station in Chicago. Diane gasped. You can't threaten us. I met her eyes. I'm not threatening, I'm promising. Marcus's hand trembled as he picked up the pen. You think you've won? You're no better than me. I smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong. I don't hurt people to feel powerful. I just make sure monsters can't hide. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for weakness, finding none, then scrawled his name. The sound of the pen scratching paper was the sweetest thing I'd ever heard. When he finished, I gathered the pages carefully and slipped them back into the envelope. Congratulations, Marcus. You finally told the truth. His voice cracked. You'll regret this. No, I said softly. You will. The clock on the wall ticked, steady and relentless. Tanya sobbed quietly. Diane sat frozen, her pride collapsing in silence. Marcus turned away, shoulders hunched, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Alina appeared then, barefoot in the doorway, clutching her rabbit. Mommy? She whispered. Diane started toward her, but I stopped her with a glance. It's okay, sweetheart. Marcus froze. For a brief second, I thought I saw guilt flash across his face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. I knelt beside Alina. Go get your things, baby. We're going home. She hesitated, looking at her father. He didn't speak. That silence was her answer. She ran upstairs, her small footsteps echoing like freedom. When she was gone, I turned to Diane. Tell yourself whatever story you need to survive. But this... I gestured to the kitchen. The poisoned mug, the tension hanging in the air. This is what enabling looks like. Her voice shook. You destroyed us. No, I said. You destroyed yourselves. I just turned on the lights. Outside, the cold air bit at my face as I stepped off the porch. The sky was a dull blue, the kind that promises rain but delivers peace instead. Kayla was waiting in the car, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. When she saw me, tears welled in her eyes. Is it done? She asked. I nodded, holding up the envelope. It's done. She exhaled, shoulders shaking. Then Alina ran out of the house straight into her mother's arms. The sound of Kayla's sob broke something in me, the kind of sound that carries both grief and relief. I stood there watching them. My sister, free again. My niece, safe. The fight that had stolen years from us was finally ending. Through the window, Marcus watched silently. He didn't look like a man anymore, just a ghost realizing the world had moved on without him. I turned to Kayla. Drive. Don't look back. She gripped my hand. You saved us, Kim. I shook my head. No. You survived him. I just gave you proof. As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time. The house loomed quiet, stripped of its power. Justice hadn't come from the courtroom. It had come from truth. Raw, recorded, undeniable. For years, I'd believed justice meant convincing others. Now I knew it meant convincing yourself. I breathed in the cold air, the weight finally sliding off my shoulders. My mother's voice echoed faintly in my mind. The law protects the good, Kimmy. Maybe, but sometimes, good has to protect itself first. I walked down the street, the envelope warm in my hand, and whispered into the wind, "Case closed." It was late afternoon when the storm finally broke. The sky over Evanston split open, rain cascading down like the world was washing itself clean. From the front porch, I watched the drops hit the driveway, blurring the reflection of the house behind me. The same house that had nearly destroyed my sister, and almost taken me with it. Kayla stood beside me, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but steady. Alina slept in the car, clutching the rabbit she refused to let go of. Everything we owned fit into the back seat. One suitcase, a box of legal documents, and the hope of something better. Marcus was gone. He'd signed the papers, packed his lies, and left before sunrise. Diane had followed, taking Tanya with her, their silence louder than any apology. The house now stood hollow and echoing, an empty monument to control and denial. Still, I lingered. I wasn't ready to leave yet. There was one thing left to do. Inside, the rooms looked smaller. The clock above the mantel had stopped ticking, its hands frozen at the exact minute he signed the papers. I walked through each room one last time, unplugging cameras, collecting the evidence that had rewritten our story. Each little lens blinked once before going dark, their job done. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped. The coffee mug was still there, faint stains circling the bottom like ghosts. I picked it up, turned it in my hands, and placed it in a box labeled evidence. Some truths didn't need to be forgotten. They just needed to be contained. Kayla joined me quietly. "It feels empty," she said. "Good," I answered. "That means it's no longer his." She hesitated. "You think we'll ever stop looking over our shoulders?" I looked at her. Really looked. The bruises on her skin were fading, but the ones behind her eyes would take longer. "Maybe not," I said softly. "But fear loses its shape when you start walking toward it." Outside, thunder rolled, deep and distant. Kayla smiled faintly. "You sound like Mom." "Yeah," I said, my throat tightening. Guess I finally understand her. We stood there for a long time, listening to the rain drum against the roof. For the first time, the sound didn't feel like warning, it felt like forgiveness. That night, we left Evanston behind. The highway stretched out in front of us, slick with rain and possibility. Alina slept in the back seat, the soft rise and fall of her breathing the rhythm of our new beginning. The further we drove, the lighter the air felt. By the time we crossed into Colorado, the clouds had lifted. Months later, our new life had roots. Denver felt alive, honest in a way Chicago never had. The air here didn't carry secrets. It carried sun and dust and something close to peace. Our new home wasn't big, but it was ours. White curtains, wooden floors, plants Kayla insisted on naming. Every corner glowed with warmth instead of fear. In the mornings, Alina laughed as she painted. By the window, her tiny hands streaked with color. Kayla had gone back to teaching, her voice strong again. Watching her in that classroom for the first time, standing tall, smiling, alive, was like watching someone step out of a shadow. As for me, I didn't return to law. The courtroom no longer felt like justice. It felt like a stage. I wanted truth, not arguments. So I started something small, a project for women leaving abusive relationships, helping them find legal aid, housing, and courage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used the very system that once betrayed us to build something that could protect others. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Alina climbed into my lap, holding a drawing. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "It's you and Mommy," she said proudly, "and me, watching you smile." I felt something break open inside me. "It's perfect," I whispered. Kayla looked up from across the room, her eyes meeting mine. There was no pain there anymore, just gratitude. She draws what she sees, she said. I smiled. Then we must be doing something right. We sat like that for a while, the three of us framed in the fading light, the sound of laughter mixing with the wind outside. For the first time in years, my body didn't brace for the next bad thing. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a single folder, the last copy of the recordings. I hesitated, then slid it into the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, orange reflections dancing across the glass. As the evidence burned, I whispered, "It's over." But part of me knew it never really would be. Trauma doesn't vanish. It changes shape. It becomes something you live beside, not under. When the last ember went dark, I pulled out my phone and opened the video Kayla had recorded earlier that day, her standing in front of her class, reading aloud. Her voice trembled at first, then grew stronger with each line. I used to think I had no value, but someone showed me that my worth doesn't belong to anyone else. It's mine. It always was. Her words hit harder than any verdict I'd ever won. That night, before sleep, I walked to Alina's room. She was dreaming, her little hand resting open, unguarded. For a moment I saw both past and future in that gesture, what had been taken, and what we'd reclaimed. I brushed her hair from her forehead. "You're safe now," I whispered. "We all are." At the window, the city lights of Denver shimmered faintly against the dark. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably still spinning lies, still convincing himself he'd been wronged. But I didn't care. His shadow no longer reached us. I thought about the woman I used to be, the lawyer who believed the system was enough. Then about the woman I became, the sister who learned that sometimes justice begins when the law ends. Smiled to myself, a small, private smile, the kind you earn, not inherit. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled new, clean. For the first time, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like someone who'd finally come home. The mountains outside Denver changed color with every sunrise, sometimes gold, sometimes pale blue, sometimes hidden in mist. But no matter how the sky shifted, one truth stayed. Peace had finally found us. It had been 6 months since we left Evanston. In the beginning, freedom didn't feel like freedom. Kayla jumped at small sounds. Alina woke crying from dreams she couldn't describe. Even I found myself listening for footsteps that would never come. Healing, I learned, wasn't dramatic. It was slow, uneven, full of days that felt like progress and nights that didn't. Our home in Denver was small but full of light. Sun pooled through wide windows each morning, warming the floors where Alina's toys sprawled. I'd chosen this house because it faced east. I wanted us to wake up facing the sun. Kayla started teaching again at a community center nearby. The first day, her hands shook when she held the chalk. By the third week, her laughter filled the classroom. Watching her come back to herself was like seeing spring push through winter. Alina loved the backyard. She planted tiny daisies along the fence, naming each one after her toys. "They grow better when you talk to them," she told me. I believed her. She spoke to the flowers the way we were learning to speak to ourselves, with patience. As for me, I didn't go back to law. I'd written my resignation quietly. No fanfare, no drama. The courtroom no longer felt like justice. It felt like performance. So I built something new. Second Voice, a small legal foundation for women escaping abuse. I worked from coffee shops and borrowed desks, running on caffeine and stubbornness. At first, only a few cases came in, then dozens. Women who spoke softly at first, afraid to be believed. Each one reminded me of Kayla, fragile, apologetic, yet burning with the desire to reclaim her story. I told every one of them what I told my sister. You are not what happened to you. You are what you decide next. There were still hard nights. Nights when the sound of a slammed door could make Kayla freeze. Nights when guilt whispered that I should have acted sooner. But the difference now was that those feelings didn't own us. They simply visited and then left. Healing, I realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live beside memory without fear. One evening, the three of us sat on the porch watching the sun drop behind the mountains. The air smelled of pine and rain. Alina hummed a tune she'd made up, her small fingers tangled in Kayla's hair. "Do you ever think about him?" Kayla asked softly. "Marcus?" I said. "Sometimes, but not with anger anymore, just distance." She nodded. "I used to dream about him. Now I don't. It's like he finally ran out of places to hide." "Good," I said. "That means your mind has caught up to your freedom." She laughed quietly, wiping a tear. "You sound like Mom." Guess I'm finally learning her language. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt like peace instead of tension. That night, after they went to bed, I opened my old journal. The first page had a line from my law school days: "Justice is the pursuit of truth." I crossed it out and wrote instead: "Healing is the practice of living after truth." When I closed the book, I walked into Alina's room. She was sleeping soundly, her small hand wrapped around a wooden rabbit. I stood there for a long time, realizing how full silence could be when it wasn't built on fear. Outside, rain began to fall. Denver rain didn't threaten, it cleansed. I stepped onto the porch, letting it hit my face, each drop a reminder that we'd survived the storm and stayed standing. The next morning, laughter pulled me from sleep. In the kitchen, Kayla and Alina were covered in flour, flipping pancakes far too big for the pan. Alina grinned at me. "We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" I asked. She pointed to the window. Outside, a single daisy had bloomed overnight. "It means we're happy now," she said. Kayla smiled. "She's not wrong." Later that day, we drove to a nearby park with a small wooden box, the last of the recordings. Together, we buried it beneath a young pine tree. No speeches, no tears, just silence. The kind that closes one chapter and begins another. When we stood, Kayla took my hand. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" "She'd say we finally remembered who we are," I said. Alina spun in circles, her laughter carrying across the grass. The sound hit something deep inside me. It wasn't just relief. It was rebirth. For years, I'd believed justice meant verdicts and signatures. Now I understood. It's what you build when no one's watching. It's the mornings you wake without fear, the dinners full of laughter, the garden that keeps growing even after the storm. When we got home that evening, Kayla tucked Alina into bed. I lingered by the doorway as she whispered, "Good night, my sunshine." Alina smiled in her sleep. The house was quiet again, this time by choice. No ticking clock, no shouted threats, just peace. Before turning out the light, I thought about everything we'd lost, and everything we'd found afterward. Revenge had given us closure, but love was giving us life. The next chapter wasn't about justice anymore. It was about joy, the quiet, ordinary kind that doesn't demand proof. I whispered to the darkness, "We made it." And for the first time in years, I believed it. The camera's red light blinked once, steady, waiting. I sat in my office in Denver, the evening sun spilling across the desk. It wasn't a courtroom, not a news studio, just a quiet room with one microphone, one cup of coffee, and one truth I'd carried for too long. I hit record. For a moment, I just listened to the soft hum of the city outside, people laughing, dogs barking, life moving. Then I began to speak. "My name is Kimberly Matthews," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And for years, I believed in a system that rewarded silence more than truth. The words came easier than I expected. Maybe because they'd been trapped inside me for years, pressing against my ribs. I was a defense attorney, I continued. I used to think the law was balance, cold, fair, blind. But the day my sister showed up bruised and terrified, I realized something I'd ignored all my life. The law doesn't see people. It sees cases. I paused, remembering Kayla's face that night, her trembling hands, the way she begged me not to call the police because she already knew how they'd look at her. I watched my sister lose faith in the world, I said quietly, and I couldn't blame her. But I also realized something else. Faith isn't something the world gives you. It's something you fight to give yourself. I looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, maybe you've been where she was. Maybe you're there right now. Maybe you've been told to stay quiet, to forgive, to endure, to survive. But you don't have to survive someone else's cruelty to prove your worth. You already have worth, simply because you're still here. I exhaled slowly. We talk about justice like it's a finish line, but sometimes it's just a beginning. Justice can't undo the past, but healing can rewrite what comes next. Behind me, a photo sat on the shelf, Kayla and Alina in the garden, smiling beneath a sky so blue it looked impossible. I turned toward it, then back to the lens. My sister taught me that survival isn't weakness, it's rebellion. Every laugh, every small act of peace, every morning you choose to wake up and try again. That's defiance. That's strength. The words came like breathing now. I built second voice because I wanted to make sure no one else felt powerless in a courtroom again. But truthfully, I built it because I needed to prove something to myself. That justice doesn't belong to systems. It belongs to people who refuse to stop speaking. I glanced down at my hands. They still bore faint scars from the past, the nights I fought too hard, the fear I couldn't quite shake. But now, those marks didn't look like shame. They looked like survival. I forgave him, I said softly. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. Holding on to his shadow only kept me living in the dark. Outside, the light was fading, the sky bleeding into gold. I knew this recording wasn't just a message. It was closure. Not for me, but for every woman who'd written to my foundation. Every whisper of me too that arrived in my inbox at midnight. If you've endured something that tried to break you, I said, you don't owe the world your silence. You owe yourself your truth. Speak it. Even if your voice shakes. Even if no one believes you at first. The world may not always listen, but someone will. And that someone might be the reason another person finds their way out. I paused, letting the silence breathe. Start over, I said finally. Even if it's messy, even if it's late, it's never too late to build something good from what was broken. The camera light blinked again. My voice dropped, quieter now, almost intimate. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's still trapped, still hiding, still believing they deserve what's happening to them, share it. Because sometimes the difference between despair and hope is one story told at the right time. I turned off the camera and sat back. The room felt full, as if the air itself was listening. A moment later, Kayla knocked on the door. You're done? Yeah, I said, smiling. It's finished. She stepped inside, holding 2 mugs of tea. I heard you talking, she said. You sounded like Mom. I laughed softly. She always knew how to make pain sound like truth. Kayla handed me a mug and sat across from me. You really forgave him? I thought for a long moment. I forgave the part of myself that ever thought he could define us. The rest, I just let go. She nodded slowly. That's enough. We sat in silence, the sun dipping below the mountains, the air golden and still. Later that evening, we uploaded the video to Second Voice's website. Within hours, messages began to flood in. Women, men, even teenagers. Stories of endurance, courage, survival. Some said my words gave them hope. Others said they'd decided to leave. Kayla read them aloud with tears in her eyes. "You did this," she whispered. "No," I said. "We did." Alina wandered into the room, clutching a drawing, a tall woman with dark hair holding hands with a smaller one beneath a bright sun. "It's us," she said. "You and Mommy, and the light." I looked at the picture for a long moment before smiling. "Yeah, baby, that's us." When she went to bed, I stepped outside. The air was cool and clean, the stars sharp and endless. For years, I'd fought battles I didn't think I could win. Inside courtrooms, inside homes, inside myself. But standing there, under that open sky, I realized something simple. The story didn't end when Marcus fell. It began the moment we stopped letting fear write it. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills your lungs all the way to the edges, and whispered into the quiet night, "We're free." And, for the first time, it didn't sound like hope. It sounded like truth. Justice didn't come to us in a courtroom. It came quietly, in forgiveness, in mornings filled with laughter instead of fear. I once believed revenge was about making them pay. Now I know it's about taking your life back and living it louder than their silence. If this story found a piece of you, the woman who stayed too long, the brother who wished he could have protected her, or the child who still flinches at raised voices, tell me what part of it spoke to your heart. Not for sympathy, but for truth. Because every comment here isn't just a reaction. It's proof that we're still standing, still healing, still choosing light after so much dark. And maybe that's the sweetest revenge of all, to live freely, kindly, and never be silent again.